Hard-boiled Haggerty in the ring now.
Today is the heyday of the pretty boy.
Kowalski is called
The Flying Gene Stanley of Chicago.
She likes it. Oh, boy, that can hurt.
Right here at ringside while we go in for a riot of roughhouse that's flatly called wrestling.
There is some Florida air courtesy of Abby Rents here in California. And George is going to have a wee bit of oxygen, I believe. A wee bit of oxygen. He said there's no smoke in that air, he's telling the announcer up there. And his valet is working over him. There's some smelling salts, a little water, and I do believe a cup of tea.
To give some understanding of the immense popularity of Gorgeous George, by the early 1950s, wrestling matches featuring Gorgeous George on television were only surpassed in North American TV ratings by the great comedian Milton Berle. George had truly brought wrestling back into the public limelight.
Onto the rope. Tally ho, dear boy.
But to fully understand the remarkable career of Gorgeous George, we have to travel back to his roots. They began in 1915 in Seward, Boyd County, Nebraska, where he was born George Raymond Wagner, the only son of house painter Elmer Wagner and his wife Elsie, who was confined to bed with a form of paralysis. These were tough times in the USA. Elmer Wagner could find no work in Seward for a house painter, and within a year of George's birth, they had first moved to Iowa and then on to Houston, Texas, where all the local talk centered around Mexico's revolutionary bandit general, Pancho Villa, and his infamous U.S. border raids, and the ongoing stark reality of a grasping depression and the seeming endless search for any kind of employment. George would tell of his family being dirt poor and spending most of his childhood in Houston either playing down near the water or caring for his invalid mother. George never even completed 12th grade at school, and by the time George reached 14, both his parents were dead. But it was then that George's life took on a new meaning. He was taken in by the James family, who had two sons, John and Jesse. Papa James had a fruit stand in the tough Harrisburg neighborhood of Houston. It was here that George, Jesse, John, and friends Dizzy Davis and Chester Hayes became known as the Harrisburg Rats, as they whiled away their days wrestling and fighting all-comers. Amazingly, all five would eventually become professional wrestlers. By the 1950s, George Wagner had been wrestling professionally for 16 years. During that time, George had both changed his name and dramatically reinvented himself. George had had what beauticians today call a makeover. In George's case, it was total. In a post-World War II redneck era, George had had the courage to portray himself as an effeminate dandy. The ensuing love-hate relationship with the wrestling fans had made George a wealthy man and TV wrestling's biggest draw.
Come, little one. It's time for my Marcel.
Goodbye, Lieutenant.
Oh, never mind, Sam. I'll take it up with the Athletic Commission.
I don't know if I can trust either of you.
Gorgeous George was a strange phenomena in wrestling. He helped popularize wrestling, and I met him in the Midwest about 2 or 3 years prior to him going for the Gorgeous George act that he had. But I'm going to do a little name dropping here, and I sure don't mean to use or abuse it, but I know Bob Hope quite well. And I was on a set with Bob Hope and when they were making the movie Fancy Pants. And I got a call from Chandra Szabo in Los Angeles. He said they were going to have a big match, and Gorgeous George is going to be there, and Burt Lancaster, everybody, and Bela Lugosi is going to be there. And he said, we would like to have you come out and referee the match. The match went very well. Everything was going all right. But to have people like Bela Lugosi in the ring seconding one of the wrestlers Bob Hope seconded Gorgeous George, and they struck up a relationship. And after the match and so forth, Bob Hope took him out to the movie set and introduced him to around and took him into the wardrobe. And he got some fantastic robes and things made for him. And just did it because he wanted to do it. And like Bob asked me, he said, he could wrestle? I said, yes, he could wrestle. Strange as it may seem, he's a good wrestler. Gorgeous George could wrestle. And so he said, I think I'd like to do something for him. I said, I think I'd appreciate that.
In 1948, George, along with his friends Johnny Ray, Billy Eckstein, and Billy Daniels, were making one of their many appearances in Las Vegas. George was in a review at the Silver Slipper Club, while next door at what was then the Last Frontier Casino, today known as the New Frontier, a beautiful young dancer model caught George's eye. Her name was Sheree Dupre. Today, Sheree lives in Florida. This is how Sheree described that first meeting with Gorgeous George, the man who was to become her life partner both in and outside of the ring.
Well, it's a very interesting beginning, and one that was rather explosive. Back in those days, Gigi had a bit of a drinking problem when he was appearing in nightclubs and things, because everybody wanted to buy him a drink. And being the kind of person he was, he didn't know how to say no. And so I was working there, and he was working at which they're connected. They're all with the same organization, the Silver Slipper and the New Frontier. And so he invited me up to his suite. He said that he had a business proposition he wanted to discuss with me, and it could make me a very great deal of money. And so I made arrangements with him that after my show and after his, that I would go up to the suite. Well, naive me, I went. It became very interesting, I'll say that. When I got up there, he opened the door. He had on an orchid smoking jacket, orchid silk pajamas, white ascot at the neck, and I thought, holy cow, what is going on here? Well, he was already, as the saying goes, 3 sheets to the wind. So immediately, he put the hit on me. And I said, no way. I said, I came up here to talk business. Now, if you're going to talk business, okay. If you're not, I'm leaving. And he thought that, well, he'd cajole me out of it and get me to change my mind. No way. So anyway, I decided that that's it. I'm not going to put up with this nonsense, and I stalked out the door and down the hall for the elevator. Lo and behold, I no sooner get to the elevator, he opens that door and starts bellowing down the hall every foul word he could think of to call me, screaming names at me, and oh, just it was embarrassing. And doors were opening. Everyone, I thought, is this elevator ever going to open up? The floor open up? Let me out of here. Anything, just let me get gone. And then the next day, when he sobered up and came out of it, a big thing of flowers came to my dressing room with an apology from him. And every day, these flowers would come and come and come with another apology. And so one day, I agreed to see him and talk to him. And I found out that when he was not in the booze, he could be a pretty nice guy all the way around. I'd worked with him before modeling, like I say, but it was never a close contact relationship. We were always friends, but never in close connection. But this was as close as we came, and then when I worked with him, I agreed to go ahead and work with him in the ring. And I finished my engagement there at the Frontier. And then I left with Gigi on the road. And from there, itself is history.
This is no longer the old male valet taking care of the human orchid, Gorgeous George. It is quite a young charmer by the name of Sheree Dupre.
Through the 1950s, because of their antics on televised wrestling matches, George and Sheree became one of the most famous TV couples in North America.
Decontaminate. I'm getting a whiff of this stuff right now, and I'm sure it isn't Chanel number 5, but it's a close 5th or 6th, I guess.
A lot of people have asked me how the spray gun came into being in the routine and in the ring. Well, to go back, when Gigi was a young man coming up in wrestling, the mats were absolutely filthy. And Gigi was a very meticulous person, a very clean person. And he started getting these terrible blood boils from having a scratch or cut and walling around on that mat, pick up the germs from it. So he got the idea from a nursery where he saw a spray gun, that they were spraying insects off of the plants. So he bought one and had a people disinfectant put into it and had a second or whomever or hire some kid ringside to go in and spray the ring. It got fancier and fancier and had it gold-plated and had stones added to it, and I came into the routine in the ring, and I would come in and spray the ring, spray the opponent, spray anything that got in my way, or anybody, didn't matter. The opponent, the referee, whomever, the ropes, everything. And then I would had a mink rug that I laid down for Gigi to come in and step on, and then after I'd done all of the routine, then I would make a neat bow, and pomp and circumstance music would become, take his robe, fold it carefully, lay it down on the mink rug, and then I proceeded to take the gold Georgie pins out of his hair. And then I'd hold them while he took them and tossed them out to ladies at the ringside.
And there go the Georgie pins with a delicate little flip of the wrist. Holy mackerel. Does that
He had
look like
a little
Herman?
quip that he would always say. They'd ask him what's in the spray gun. He'd say, Chanel number 10. Well, there is no such thing as Chanel number 10. They'd say, don't you mean Chanel number 5? He says, no, 10. Why be half safe? His little joke.
But I have no fear for Elio DiPaolo. He's a very clean, upright young man. And certainly, now Joe Moscato, the referee, gets a little. This bout hasn't even gotten underway yet, if you can imagine. Sheree Dupre, the valet, was using that atomizer pretty well. And it harks back to the days of when they used it over Bob Wagner. The bout is now officially underway with an airplane spin. It's all over. If you think Gorgeous George is dazed, you should see this crowd. They're all breaking around the ring now. Gorgeous George is completely dazed. He has no idea what's happened. Just about ready to take it out on his female valet, but she's got the atomizer in her right hand. He's blaming his defeat on his valet. But slight though she may be, she can handle that thing, I can assure you.
The human orchid faded in 17 seconds. The winner, Elio DiPaolo.
Gorgeous George is still protesting that airplane spin was not legal, and he wants to get this match underway once again. But of course, it's all over officially, and that's the way it'll stay in the record books. Elio DiPaolo winning over Gorgeous George in a matter of 17 seconds after his famous airplane spin.
Going to a televised wrestling match in the 50s, 60s, and 70s was an important social occasion, and fans dressed accordingly as they sat up close and personal at ringside. Some claimed that the wrestlers' performance and shenanigans were sometimes over the top, but George knew the value of playing it to the fans seated way up there in the gods. But make no mistake, play acting or not, these guys were tough.
Here, dear friends, is Chief Don Eagle.
On May 26, 1950 in Chicago, Illinois, George was to reach the pinnacle of his wrestling career when he beat Don Eagles and won the American Wrestling Association world title. Eagles claimed he was double-crossed and endeavored to beat up referee Omar Holland. Eagles was quite successful on that account.
Boy, didn't he bluff Mollahan there then. This is the first time Lou Gordon, one of the commissioners in here, War Eagle. Everybody, boy, this is a shamble. The fans are throwing things into them. Hey, Don, come here, boy.
As for George, for his efforts, he was to receive a split lip from an irate fan during the ensuing post-fight chaos.
All around him here. I haven't seen an ugly crowd in my life, but this is one of the worst. Let's just quit looking around and go home. What do you say? Look at this ring. It's a shambles.
George was to lose his only world title just 2 months later, again in Chicago, but this time to the great Lou Thez.
We wrestled several times, and I wrestled him in Chicago at the Wrigley Field. We went out there, and he had a move that he made where he was very agile. He could jump 4 or 5 feet in the air. You know, very agile fellow. And he would go ahead and make a move like he's going behind the guy, and when the guy would try to block him, he would mount him and jump on his back and do a forward roll, and got some pinfalls on some people that way. Anyway, he did that. Was going to do that with me when we wrestled there, and I was watching him. When I saw him do that, I just kept him going and wheeled him over the top rope. Well, he hit the press corps down below, and they're all loaded with typewriters at that time. Now they have other equipment, but typewriter, and it hit him. It's wonder it didn't take his eye or something, but it hit him here and cut his scalp wide open. And he came in the ring, and I thought he would stay out of there, you know, because he's bleeding terribly. And he came in and attacked me. He said, "This may be the end," but he said, "I'm going to get you." I said, "It's a little late, baby."
Gorgeous George brings me back to January 1950. I had just turned 17, and I was wrestling professionally in New York City. And at that time, the only thing on television was Milton Berle and wrestling about 3 times a week. And Gorgeous George was the first to bring color, bizarre, difference, showbiz type thing into professional sports. And it's not just professional wrestling now, but you're starting to see it in basketball, and you're starting to see it in football. More and more, the athletes becoming colorful. In fact, Muhammad Ali was trained by the great Red Berry on how to present himself and handle himself on the microphone. So, but back to Gorgeous George, he gave me these stitches here, so I always remember him every time I shave.
By the 1960s, many famous entertainers were copying George's outrageous antics. Liberace endeavored to out-costume George, while Muhammad Ali freely admits he styled his self-adulation rhetoric after listening to George at ringside. By 1962, George had competed in over 3,000 wrestling matches, and it showed. Years of drink and gambling had finally caught up with him. He still owned Gorgeous George's ringside restaurant and bar in Van Nuys, California. He still had Sheree and their handsome son Gary. But he also had a sickness, and he knew it would soon kill him.
He came down with cirrhosis of the liver and had to go on a special diet, no fatty foods, take all this medication, no alcohol, nothing carbonated. I mean, it was very strict. And the doctor said, either you follow it, or in 3 weeks you're dead. Well, that scared him. And for about 8 or 9 months, he followed it. Then one day, he thought he was sick of fighting it. If he had to live the rest of his life the way he was having to live, not being able to eat steaks or to do the things that he wanted to do and enjoyed doing, why bother? So he started drinking again and literally drank himself to death.
He died actually a pauper. He died I was a pallbearer at his funeral. And he died in a place, Glendale. He was a bartender, and his wife was the waitress. And I think the wrestling office, Jules Strongbow in the office at that time was the promoter. They paid for the funeral.
They put up $2,000, $1,000 each. The funeral itself cost over $10,000. That $2,000 was a drop in the bucket. I worked for over 8 years, 2 jobs, to pay off that debt. And I'm sick of other people taking credit for it. If they were paying it, why was I working my behind off? I didn't like it at all. But he had a beautiful funeral. His funeral cortege was over 4 miles long. Every celebrity you could think of was there. It was really something. Gigi, I still miss you, and I still have great love in my heart for you.
Please refer to your manuals.